Okay, Madam Chair, we're live.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Committee Number 6, Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources. I will call this meeting to order, and if you would please call roll.
Representative Banks. Here. Representative Harrelson. Representative Jennings. Here. Representative Knapp. Here. Vice Chair Newsom.
Here.
Representative Sweeney.
Here.
Representative Williams.
Here.
Representative Winter.
Here.
Madam Chair Flitner.
Present. Thank you, Carol.
You're welcome.
So as you all will recall, we left off with Senate File 61 on Tuesday. So that's where we were going. We're going to pick that up with, I'm going to provide one last person to provide public comment because she had reached out to me prior to the last meeting and she was online at the last meeting. And so I will allow Gwen McKee to please come into the meeting and provide testimony, and then we will end public testimony.
Madam Chair, she's been admitted. She just needs to turn on her mic and video.
Okay.
How's that?
There you are. Hello,
Oh.
welcome, Ms. McKee. Please identify yourself and introduce yourself to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair and committee members, my name is Gwen McKee. I am the president and principal biologist for Great Plains Wildlife Consulting in Banner, Wyoming. I really appreciate the opportunity to participate remotely. And I know y'all have a full schedule this afternoon. So with your permission, Madam Chair, I'm just going to jump right in and go as fast as I can.
Please do. A couple minutes, 2 to 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So I'm testifying today as a professional wildlife biologist and a sportswoman. I have been assisting the surface coal mines in northeastern Wyoming and southeastern Montana for the last 28 years with their wildlife monitoring and mitigation needs. I also have relevant experience with captive game birds and removing wild eggs from the wild, collecting eggs from the wild, and then ultimately rearing the youngsters to a successful release back into the wild. I also have experience capturing and collaring sage grouse in multiple places in Wyoming and have been monitoring them for nearly 3 decades as well. So my testimony today is a reiteration of what I've sent to the committee in a couple of different emails. So I'm, as you know, respectfully requesting that the committee use its authority under a revised, to consider a revised version of SF 61. Because as I've said it before, I'm not convinced that the current statute is biologically warranted or sustainable at this time. And the main points are that I want to talk about today are considering changes and the value of the annual certification process. So we heard on Tuesday, multiple proponents of SF 61 actually indicate a willingness to compromise, which I was very encouraged by. And that includes Chairman Perkins acknowledging that an extension to the current sunset date would be an option, preferably in a general session year. Former Representative Luthi stated that Governor Gordon supports extending the current sunset date, and other examples that you all heard. So in my mind, that's a strong foundation for pursuing that option. As for the annual certification process, I'm afraid eliminating it could result in unintended consequences, particularly because there's 4 other potential licensees out there. And if the sunset date is removed from the statute, I can see every current and future game bird farm operator in the state asking for a similar waiver. And maybe a current operator is doing a great job and maybe they aren't. And maybe a future operator is going to be ready to go and maybe they aren't. But I think that's an unfortunate potential negative unintended consequence. So I apologize for stuttering. I'm just trying to go faster. It's an important component of oversight, and it does have the ability to have some flexibility. So I really believe that keeping it is not an onerous part of the process. The other concern we heard is about removing eggs. And I think the biggest concern there is there's really no clarity in the current statute as far as how long egg collection could occur. So the main things, like I say, in my mind, I'm just super abbreviating this, and I usually talk to like pronghorn and stuff. So I'm sorry for being so awkward and nervous today, but in my mind, we all heard people express a willingness to compromise. And to me, that's the bottom line of this bill. Just simply removing a sunset date on an unproven endeavor that has struggled to succeed, has the best of intentions, undoubtedly, I think is premature at this time. And I have probably gone too long already, so I apologize, but I really appreciate the opportunity to say what I've said as awkwardly as I have said it. And if you would like to read my email, it's really a lot better than this. So anyway, thank you again, Madam Chair and committee, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Ms. McKee, thank you for your time. It was not awkward. It was very well said. So we appreciate you taking the time to address the committee and also to send your letters. Thank you for what you do. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So with that, we'll end public testimony, but Director Nezvik, would you mind stepping back up to the microphone and just addressing some of the concerns that we heard throughout testimony before we move forward?
Absolutely, Madam Chair. Good morning, Brian Nezvik, Director of Wyoming Game and Fish. So there was a couple of things that I wanted to make very, very clear. So from the department's perspective, sage grouse in Wyoming are not on the brink of extinction or of needing any kind of protections under the Endangered Species Act. Biologically, there's not a justification to place this particular species on the endangered species list with respect to anything that's going on in Wyoming. With that said, there are other factors that influence the federal government's decisions on when they decide to list a species. And as was identified multiple times, there will be additional petitions, I have no doubt, and there will be requests of the service to list the bird. There's other states that have sage grouse, their range is wide, but I just wanted to make it very clear, in Wyoming, we have a healthy sage grouse population. It's at the bottom of a trough in a cyclic trend that we've seen throughout time. The other thing I wanted to also just follow up a little bit, Representative Banks had a question the other day about any other species of wildlife in Wyoming that is permitted or allowed to be transferred from a public asset or a public property into private hands. And there is, under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, the federal government permits falconers, those people who use raptors, birds of prey, to hunt. They allow some of those raptors to be collected by a private individual and then taken into their own private property, made there and taken into possession. We use a state permit under the federal permit to also so that they've got state authorization to do that. There is an ability for some other species, for example, predatory animals, coyotes, or even fur bearers. There's an ability for people to ask the department to take ownership of those kind of species, but it's not a real common practice. So I just wanted to make that clear. And then after all the testimony, I certainly wanted to be here for the committee to answer any other questions that I might be able to answer for you.
Thank you, Director. Committee, any questions for Director Nezvik? Yes, Vice Chairman Newsom.
Thank you. Director, the game farm apparently has pheasants and chukars and are those, how is it that they have those birds as part of the farm? Or do they collect eggs, or maybe the bird farm folks are a better place to ask that question? But
yeah, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair. So we do permit bird farms in Wyoming, and specifically the species that you just mentioned are the most common. So there are bird farms around the state that either most of them buy birds from another location and have them brought in. But we do, if they meet a lot of regulatory requirements, we authorize other bird farms to raise those birds in captivity at a bird farm. They're primarily raised for hunting purposes.
Thank you. Representative Williams, did you have a question? No. Okay. All right. Thank you, Director. I appreciate the extra time. So committee, what's your pleasure? Moved by Sweeney, seconded by Haroldson. Committee, I have provided you with a proposed amendment It's been handed out. And before I bring my amendment, does anybody else have any, do you have any discussion on the bill? Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So after last on Tuesday and the conversation, I just want to thank everyone for coming out, and what I really want to see and what I felt coming out of that is everyone in this place, both sides of this conversation, care about the population of this species. That's why we're doing this. And none of us want to see this bird ever put on the endangered species list, because the ramifications to our state would be astronomical. And so I appreciate both sides. I appreciate both sides putting and sharing their opinion on this. So we talked about kind of some sideboards, and we found after talking to our legal staff that due to the nature of this bill, the sideboards that maybe we wanted to throw on, we couldn't do right now. And so I think that this is a conversation that will probably continue into the future. But I believe that Chairman Flitner's amendment will bring us to a place where we can move this forward and make this actually work for both parties involved. So,
And just for those of you who are in the audience, my amendment is to extend the sunset date. I, came to this conversation much like many of you who are opposed to it. I was in this body when we drafted the original legislation, and I did vote for it. I was skeptical at the time, still skeptical, but when you think about the ramifications of what listing could be to our state, to our industries that keep the wheels under this bus, that is too great of a risk for me to take what research and data has been gleaned from this project thus far and throw it out. And I think I would remind everybody that there's been one egg collection. They are sticking with the eggs and the birds that they have, and nobody wants to see them disposed of. So my proposal is just to extend this sunset date and allow them a little more time. And economics may prove to be their end before this sunset date. I don't know, but who knows what may come of it. And none of us want to see this bird listed. We all love the bird, and Wyoming has always maintained a delicate balance between industry and our beautiful wildlife. And that's what we want to continue to do. So that is the gist of the amendment. It would, and also just to also speak to the testimony that we heard about trying to adjust egg collection numbers and the licensure. The language of the bill and the title of the bill is very, very narrow and tight. And yes, constitutionally, we cannot bring in any other element of this statute in order to change any of that. We can only address really whether to eliminate the sunset or to extend it. And it is, so I move my amendment, which would be to extend the sunset date 7 years to December 31st, 2029. And then, okay, seconded by Sweeney. Discussion? No discussion? Then I'll call for, oh, you gotta let me know.
I was trying to turn it on, Madam Chair. So what, if I could ask, because I was not here on Tuesday, it had to be in another committee meeting, why 7? Because the original was 5, and I might be willing, I think 5 might be a better, or 3 or something like that, because we've already got a 5-year. And so if you could explain to me why 7.
Oh, 7 seemed like a nice round number to me. Well, because there were some that wanted the complete annihilation of the sunset. There were some that wanted 12 to 15 years. 5 didn't seem like enough time. 7 just seemed like a practical number. And also we want to put it back into an even numbered year so that it'll be brought back in an odd numbered year. Yeah, so it'll be brought back in a general session. That makes all the sense in the world. Yes, Representative Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could you consider 9?
We could, but let's stick with 7. All right, amendment on the floor has been moved. All those in favor, vote by raise of hand. Opposed, same sign. We have 2 in opposition. The amendment is passed. We are back on the bill. Any other amendments? All right, Carol, would you please call the roll?
Representative Banks. Representative Harrelson. Representative Jennings. Representative Knapp. Vice Chair Newsom.
Aye.
Representative Sweeney. Representative Williams. Representative Winter. Madam Chair Flitner.
Aye.
Madam Chair, 9 ayes do pass with amendments.
Thank you, Carol. Appreciate it. And thanks again to everyone who traveled all the way to Cheyenne or who got online and provided testimony. We appreciate it and best of luck. All right, let's keep rolling along. We have our next bill before us. Where is it? Welcome, Senator Boner. Senate File 86, wildfires, one call exemption. Senator Boner, welcome to committee number 6. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Members of the committee, this is a short bill, but an important one to help support your firefighters who fight fire each and every year and have to do so hopefully free of bureaucratic requirements that serve no purpose in their circumstances. So the issue in particular is dealing with the one call statute, which currently requires that our wildland firefighters do that initial call. They don't have to wait the 2 days, obviously, but they're still required to make a call before they create a fire line. And this is problematic. It has a chilling effect on their operations. If you're a local contractor who maybe on occasion helps create these fire lines, there's liability concerns that prevent them from participating. And there's also, say, a county road grader who does have an exemption under these statutes on occasion has been hesitant to help. This puts lives and property at risk. And while I certainly understand the need for the one call statute and respect what they do, and they do perform life-saving work each and every day, once you dig down into the facts of how this works, they're just not in a position to help in a meaningful way. So yeah, you can make that call, and we have some firefighters here who can explain how this works. But even if they do get somebody locate out there on site, they're probably not going to be allowed on site because there's fire. And so I just point out that we drag hundreds of miles of lines every fire season. There has not been a single instance where those fire lines have destroyed infrastructure. And so once again, this is removing the chilling effect on important work that has to happen this fire season. It also will basically bring our statutes in line to what the current reality is on the ground. So that's a basic overview of the bill. You see, it's very simple. It's simply adding an exemption in our one call statutes. And that's the overview of the bill, Madam Chairwoman. I know you're busy. There's not much more to it than that. Conceptually, obviously, there's plenty of entities that have underground infrastructure. I did reach out to the one call folks, both their executive director and the president of the association. Unfortunately, the intent was to find some sort of compromise. The response was just a no, a hard no. And so I'm disappointed in that. That's why I'm here presenting a bill that does not have consensus. But once you, I believe, committee members sort of dig into the facts of how this works, or more to the point doesn't work, I think you'll find that the facts are clearly on the side of the firefighters. And like I said, it's important that we move this bill forward this year to remove the chilling effect that will be in effect once we start seeing fires in a few months. Okay. So that being said, Madam Chairwoman, that's the bill.
Okay.
I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee questions for Chairman Boner? Oh, all right. Thank you, sir. Do we have anybody from the executive branch to testify on this bill? Please come forward.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman. My name is Bill Crapser. I'm the state forester. It's been my honor to be your state forester for the last 19 years. Just to give you some background of fire in the state, On average, we have about 1,000 non-federal fires, wildfires in Wyoming a year. About 98% of those we have success during initial attack, mainly due to the county fire departments, the volunteers around the state. A lot of times, especially in the eastern half of the state, volunteer fire departments rely heavily on road and bridge or on contractors in the area with road graders. As Senator Boner mentioned, there's hundreds of miles of road grader line put in a year. That's to stop mainly range fires. There's also countless miles of hand line put in a year. In the 19 years I've been doing this, I'm not aware of any damage to underground facilities in firefighting. If fire gets larger or if there is pipelines in the area, obviously the county, we as the state or the federal agencies coordinate closely with the utilities in the area. I did poll a few other states and with the fire director for the National Association of State Foresters, who's also the retired state forester of Florida. And he's not aware of any other state where for wildland fire operations where one call is in the loop for IA operations. Really, Madam Chairwoman, there's some county fire folks here that can explain the situation to you better than I probably. I'm here supporting the counties, supporting wildfire, and be glad to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Okay, committee questions for Mr. Crapser? Okay, thank you, sir. I appreciate your testimony. All right, so we'll open this up to public testimony. So come down, whomever. Go ahead, Mr. Winnie. Pardon me? Oh, I'm sorry. I have legislators. Just don't move. You're fine. Yes, I'm sorry. Representative Stivar, you usually are waving your arms. You should have done that. Sorry. How could I?
Thank you, Madam
forget were
Chairman.
there?
Fighting wildfires is an important thing, but we also have to look at the safety aspect of this. I've got some phone calls out. I could not find anything in the Common Ground Alliance about exempting firefighters from calling the one call. Under the dirt toll, under the Common Ground Alliance, there was 193,000 telecommunication hits. There was 87,000 gas lines, natural gas lines hit this last year. And that's what's just been reported in the dirt toll. I think it's an important, they if it's not the firefighters, when the emergency response team gets the call, that they call 811. So these pipeline companies can do what they need to do to shut the pipe down, make sure it's located. They don't have product in the pipe, because you hit one of these pipes, it goes boom. And I've seen it twice. Once in the early 80s over by Granger, Wyoming, and just here recently, just south of my house, they were installing a pipeline and they were supposed to be marked. So we need to really stop and think of what we're going to be doing with this.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Representative Stivar? Representative Haraldson?
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Representative Stivar, so the numbers that you just gave us, were those numbers from firefighting operations?
Representative Stivar.
Madam Chairman, Representative Haraldson, I can't say that. I've got to get in the dirt toll and look that up. This just came yesterday in the mail that I'm a member of this organization, Damage Prevention. And I'll have to look in the dirt toll and see if there's a thing on there that says they could break that down. If not, have it put on, because we need to know.
Follow up.
Follow up.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Representative Stivar, so the two gas line hits that you have mentioned, were those due to firefighter activity?
Representative Stivar.
Madam Chairman, Representative Haraldson, no, I said they were constructing new lines.
Just was
that
one
were hit.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
sir.
Further questions for Representative Stivar? Thank you. Appreciate your testimony. And Mr. Winnie, before you start, I do see that online, Clarissa, we have one call of Wyoming, the executive director, if you could admit them while we're hearing testimony from Mr. Winnie. Go ahead, Mr. Winnie.
Madam Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County. I'm the guy that stayed on his property when Roosevelt Fire blew by in the Bondurant area. The good news is when Forester Crapser's people gave us a briefing about 6 weeks before the fire kicked off, I paid attention and prepared my property. But the result was I saw their firefighting efforts, the bulldozing and other things, along with the aviation stuff of it. But one thing that I think is important to keep in mind is these fires move quickly. The fire kind of languished for 5 days. I was watching it, watching the weather. I'm somewhat trained with regard to weather. Not that I could do a TV program on it, but you get used to that. At any rate, that afternoon when it blew through, I knew that about 2 p.m, the wind was going to kick up to about 15 knots and shift to the west. And sure enough, it did. And from, I think, about 5 to 8 miles away, it got to my property in about 2 hours. Point being, these guys have to respond fast sometimes when the weather changes. The other thing I would mention, I am trained somewhat on firefighting, but it's shipboard firefighting, a little bit different, but you do what you got to do to fight it. And I happened to be looking to the southwest here in Cheyenne. I think it was around 2005 when a bulldozer hit a pipe down to the southeast of us. And I happened to see the fireball, and those things are big. So firefighters got to coordinate somehow with what's underground. Generally, I see that they pretty much are just interested in a fire break on the surface, but they're going to do what they got to do. I suspect they come prepared with maps that show them what's there, so they kind of have an idea. But the point being, they got to do what they got to do. So subject to your questions, thank you.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Winnie? Thank you, sir. Representative Nyman, I didn't see that you were there. Do you care to testify? Okay. Do we, and you know, how many people in the room, I'm not going to get caught like I did last week. How many people out there would like to provide testimony? Okay, so with that in mind, if you all would please bear in mind that there are a number of folks want to testify. I have 3 or 4 people online that also would like to testify. So if you could please keep your comments to 2 to 3 minutes and try not to be repetitive, that would be helpful. So we have time to work this bill and the next bill. And so do we have Ms. Warren online?
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair.
Welcome. Please provide testimony to the committee.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman and members of the House Travel Committee. My name is Jan Warren. I'm the Executive Director for One Call of Wyoming. Been in this position for about 3 years. Very familiar with the One Call process over the last 30 years from my previous career. Before I talk about SF 86, I would first like to address a few stated facts for the public from previous sessions and clear up some of those misnomers, if you will. First, One Call of Wyoming and several stakeholders have been open and ready to work on language pertaining to SF 86. Secondly, we do have a new software system. It was mentioned in previous testimony regarding GPS coordinates. We do allow for GPS coordinates. We don't need a specific address. Lastly, no one, and no matter how long someone has been in a position or a resident of this state or their county, knows where these utilities are. And that's why 811 exists throughout developed nations across this globe. So this bill does not just impact Platte County. This bill impacts all counties and residents within our state. One Call of Wyoming, we have done some tremendous amount of work over the past few years, especially in regards to our new systems, and so that we can maintain an adequate excavation enforcement program as defined by PHMSA, or the Pipeline Hazardous Material and Safety Administration. When exemptions such as SF 86 are introduced, especially the way it's written today, this will require a written justification for this exemption, and this is required for any exemption entered into excavation laws as cited in 49 CFR 198.55. PHMSA requires that states know and understand the impact of the exemptions, and again, provide a written justification for them when they appear problematic. And this exemption as written today, it is problematic. What I mean by this is it's too broad. For example, the wording, scope of all activities, suppression of wildfires, unless specifically defined, might have the potential to be abused or even misinterpreted. We need to define what are all activities. Activities needs clarified. Would there have to be a state of emergency for this exemption to kick in? My point being is that more definitive language needs to be added to this to consider this exemption safe and necessary for Wyoming and our brave firefighters who do this dangerous work. This brings me to my closing point. Our current law already provides for definition of emergency in 3712-301B2. Fire is included in that language. Emergency means a sudden unforeseen occurrence, including loss of communication that demands immediate action to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public, to prevent loss of life, health, property, or essential services. An advance notice to the notification center prior to excavation is impractical under the circumstance. Emergencies shall include ruptures, leaks of pipelines, explosions, fires, and similar instances where immediate action is necessary to prevent loss of life or significant damage to our facilities and environment. With that, I would simply and humbly ask that as responsible leaders of this state, we take a step back, come back together, have discussions about SF 86, its language and its necessity, and what we can do to assist the firefighting community, their work, and not be a burden or hindrance on their jobs. With that, I'll stand.
Ms. Warren, could you repeat that statute that you cited? Because I only have the 3712-305 in front of me.
Yes, ma'am. 3712-301B, paragraph 2.
And would you please repeat it?
The entire paragraph?
The section that you had cited previously, just that.
Yes, yes, ma'am. Emergency means unforeseen occurrence, including a loss of communications, which demands immediate action to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public and to prevent loss of life, health, property, or essential public services, and an advance notice to the notification center prior to excavation is impractical under the circumstance. Emergency shall include ruptures and leakage of pipelines, explosions, fires, and other instances where immediate action is necessary to prevent loss of life, significant damage to underground facilities, or the environment.
Thank you, ma'am. Questions for Ms. Warren? Yes, Representative Banks.
Chairwoman Fuller, thank you. Ms. Warren, just a quick question. How does the process work now if there is a fire and I assume then they are required to call you at first? Can you walk us through that, how that process works and what the difference is if I call as a homeowner and I'm doing something on my property? Because I know that sometimes takes a while, right? So how does it work when there is an emergency? Thank you.
Ms. Warren.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Committee. So when there is a fire, as has been stated, currently phone calls are not being made to the 811 center so that we can get the word out to the utilities that there is a problem or an incident occurring around their facilities. We send out a communication to all utilities in that area, letting them know. It's my understanding currently that most of their dispatchers or the PSAPs are already calling those utilities one by one. We provide that communication link that notifies them of what's going on. As a homeowner or a regular routine excavation, that would be a 2 business day requirement. Emergencies means exactly what is defined in the law. We go for it. We get after what needs to be done.
Ms. Warren, I have a question for you. With regard to the previous statute that you cited, 3712-301B, my history with fighting any rangeland fire on our ranch, it's in a remote northeast or southeast section of Johnson County, 60 miles from Casper, which would be the nearest town. And when grass fires start or fires start in this pine treed section of our property, they move fast. And so it's all hands on deck. You start fighting any way you can to try to suppress the fire. And when the winds blow like they do, it can move fast and cover a lot of ground. So in that case, would we be exempted as ranchers under 3712 301B and protected?
It's an emergency and it is a fire.
Okay, thank you. Senator Boner, would you mind coming forward? I have a question for you. I'm assuming you looked at that statute. Thank you, Ms. Warren. I appreciate it. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Would you mind just speaking to that?
Yes, that's what exempts them from the 2-day time constraint. It's not an exemption for that initial phone call. So as I stated, they still have to make that initial phone call, which if you don't, there's liability concerns associated with if you do hit underground infrastructure. So that's the crux of the issue. Just because that emergency exemption is what waives the 2-day requirement that they have to wait 2 days while the fire's going. So yeah, very well aware of that provision of the statute.
Okay, further questions for Senator Boner? All right, thank you, sir. Okay, come on down, Mr. Applegate.
Madam Chairman, Committee, I'm Lanny Applegate, representing the Wyoming Fire Chiefs. And I have a long history in the fire service. I started in 1975, and I've been on a lot of fires in Wyoming, Colorado, California. When California burned back in '87, the particular fire I was on, there was anywhere from 6,000 to 8,000 firefighters on that there. And all the fires I've been in Wyoming and whatnot, there's been numerous times where I've seen heavy equipment up there. I served 8 years as a county commissioner in Fremont County, and there's numerous times where we sent county motor graders and dozers out to assist until we get a private contractor on site. And I would just say that we've never had any issues. More times than not, that they're just building a fire line, if you will. They're not digging. So, they're most times they're that deep or less. And so I won't say it would never happen, but I can tell you that I've never witnessed it in 47 years myself. I was a state fire marshal for 10 years here in Cheyenne, and yearly or semi-annually, we had an opportunity for the 811 folks and some other folks with different petroleum companies. They would bring maps and whatnot, and I know they would share them with some of the rural fire districts and whatnot, and I believe they probably still do today. So I would just say that when the alarm calls, that's the last thing on those folks, those volunteers' mind is to let's run to a phone and call dispatch. They're going out there to save property and lives and whatnot, and they may not get that call made. And once they're there, they're there to try to put a fire out and protect property and lives. Lives more foremost, obviously. So with that, I would support the bill as written.
Okay, questions for Mr. Applegate? So before you leave, was it just understood as a county commissioner, as a fire chief, that when you got the call and you ran to action, that you knew about 811, and at any point during the process, did you ever, somebody within the county office or whatever, make that call? I'm just curious.
Madam Chairman, no, I'll have to tell on myself a little bit. I'm a city firefighter, but I went out on a lot of rural calls, and requested. So no.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate your testimony.
What you guys do?
Who else would like to testify? Come on down. And if there are several of you, you can come together. There's 4 seats, 4 microphones. Come on down. Just need to ensure that they're on, that you should have a green light. Go ahead.
Madam Chairperson and esteemed members of the House Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources Committee, good afternoon. And thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. With your permission, I have prepared some remarks for the record.
Sure. Could you please introduce yourself and pull the mic just a little closer?
My name is Dylan Ort. I am the Right-of-Way and Public Awareness Coordinator for Suncor Energy USA Pipeline Company, located at 1700 Cutler Road, Cheyenne, Wyoming, 82001. Suncor operates crude oil transmission pipelines in Platte and Laramie counties. We are here to provide comments on the bill SF 0086 Wildfires One Call Exemption, which amends Wyoming Statute 37-12-305. The statute is part of Title 37 Public Utilities, Chapter 12, Article 3, Damage to Underground Public Utility Facilities, more commonly known as the One Call Law or the Call Before You Dig Law. I'll pause here to allow the others with me to introduce themselves and their roles and their addresses.
Barry McCann. I'm the Cheyenne Area Supervisor for all Cheyenne area operations, and it is my responsibility to respond to 811. My group is responsible for responding to 811 locates in the area.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Madam Chair, my name is Bob Fenton. I am the Damage Prevention Supervisor for Tallgrass Energy, and I office out of Casper, Wyoming.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Reagan Marsh, Manager of Integrity for Suncor USA Pipeline Company.
Thank you.
While this group agrees that any and every advantage should be provided to wildland firefighters, any such advantage should be made with the goal of improving the safety of firefighters, emergency responders, the public, and the environment. Jointly, this group believes strongly that this amendment works against this goal. I reached out to the bill's sponsor, Senator Bonner, about the purpose of this bill. My interpretation of what was conveyed is that the bill is to protect wildland firefighters from economic liability associated with the civil penalties contained within the bill as currently written. These fines begin at $5,000 for a first offense of failing to make a one call before digging, and a $5,000 fine for damaging underground infrastructure without having a valid one call in place. This is before any assessed economic damages associated with the repair or cleanup of a ruptured pipeline. The existing act currently includes protections to emergency excavators, of whom the responding wildland firefighters would be counted as so long as an emergency locate had been placed under section 37-12-306, subsections D and G3B. The proposed amendment removes a critical layer of protection and unnecessarily risks firefighters, Wyoming residents, and the environment. It is important to note that an emergency responder does not call, if an emergency responder does not call and damages a pipeline, including during the response to a wildland fire, the result could be environmental damage, injury, or death. Underground infrastructure operators and subject matter experts who support our industry are more than willing to collaborate with lawmakers and appropriate stakeholders to find the right solutions to the issue that needs to be solved, which is how to appropriately account for wildland firefighting within the one call law so that our firefighters are kept safe and the interests of Wyoming residents are protected. The job of firefighters is dangerous enough as it is. This exemption would unnecessarily add to the dangers they already face. As written, this amendment would be akin to sending firefighters into a fire without a crucial layer of personal protective equipment or a doctor operating without a mask. It simply puts them in the line of fire. We urge you to lay the vote back for further work. This does not serve firefighters, Wyoming residents, or to protect the environment as written. Thank you for your time today, and we await any questions for the committee.
Okay, questions for Suncor Committee? Yes, Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So the question I would have is, so I guess a couple questions. One, at what depth are your pipelines buried? And then second, the one calls aren't being made, never have. So this is a situation where we keep saying this is the protection and that they haven't been, they're being protected and they won't be after this. These calls haven't been made. We are just aligning statute with what the practice is. So I guess those are two questions of your thoughts on that, and then also your depth of pipeline burial.
Well, I'll answer the
go ahead,
Madam Chairman and Mr. Representative. I'll answer the second question first. So to be quite frank, it seems to me then that the wildland firefighters have been violating state statute rather than trying to align themselves with what exists. That process is already in place. It's been in place for a long time. We work with the local emergency planning committees. We talk to the emergency managers, the 911 call centers. It's our understanding that a lot of those calls go out through the 911 call center after that fire has been reported. So it may not be that the individual firefighter is making that call, but it is being made. So
And the depth?
to answer, I'm sorry, the depth. So I'm going to start with the simple statement of the wind happens to blow in Wyoming, as we probably all know. To that end, pipelines are generally installed starting in 1930s at approximately 3 feet of depth. After about 1950 to 1960, that increased to closer to 40 to 48 inches. Our pipelines, Suncor's in specifically York County, were installed anywhere from 1938 to 1948, with some of them done in 1989. So you have a mix of depths, anywhere from, again, that 3 foot level could have been eroded down to something less than 3 feet. What that number is particularly, it depends on the circumstance. It could certainly put those firefighters at risk in those locations where it is not optimal. We work hard to identify those and reclaim those situations as they're found.
So 3 foot to what's ballpark then on the
low or the high side, ma'am?
On the low. Oh, no, the high side. I want to know what would be the absolute, would be on the high side in terms of.
High as in the least cover?
Yes.
Ma'am, that could be potentially up to 0, depending on the wind and the water erosion circumstances. There are many reasons that could happen.
So they've been exposed over time.
That is true.
Okay.
And that is a significant reason why our operations folks should be brought in as soon as possible to help bring that awareness to the firefighters.
Okay. Further questions for Suncor? Yes, Representative Williams.
Thank you, Chair, Madam Chairman. So I'll just give you a little of my experience, and maybe you can tell me where I've erred. So Eastern Wyoming is perhaps a little low tech. When we have a fire there, number one, there's not cell service. So we'll have a fire start. Sometimes multiple fires. I've had up to 14 fires burning at once with a hot cloud comes by, grass fires. And so all the neighbors come, nobody's been called on radio or phone. I mean, you can tell by the smoke what's going on. So we'll have, sometimes 40, 50 different firefighters, different grass units, most of them private, until we can get response from town 50 miles away. And so that's the reality. That doesn't seem like it fits into your program that great.
Well, it will. Someone eventually has to dial 911 and say there's a fire. The next phone call could be 811. Emergency response by the utility provider does not mean we have to stop all your operations until we get there to go put flags in the ground. We want to be a liaison with the incident command, whoever that might be, a fire chief, an engine chief, or just the guy fighting on the ground or the rancher, and let them be aware of where we are and what the depths might be, and that we're on our way to help, or you might not even be affected by Suncor depending on where you're at. But 811 is a vital connection between the safety of personnel, or the public, and the utilities and the firefighters. It really scares somebody like me who sees it every day. I'm sorry we didn't get the information quick enough. This all kind of surprised us about how many accidents and deaths happen without an 811 call, when you don't call and don't know. So many people die because I know where that line's at, or I really need to do this. 811 was created because people died because of not knowing where underground facilities are. Wyoming is a very energy bound state. We have pipelines ranging from the 20s to modern day in the ground. Erosion between wind, everything has moved those lines to close to or exposed depths. They could be hidden by bushes. And as soon as you drop a blade, you are putting whoever's in that piece of equipment at risk. The gentleman earlier brought up the fact of the dozer that went, blew up the line just south of here. It's a really good example of what can happen. We can't lay on the laurels of, well, I've been 15 years and nothing's ever happened. That's not why 811 was built. 811 was built so it never happens. And we have a good communication between the utilities and the people on the ground doing the excavation. That's the purpose of this. It doesn't mean that you can't get the plow out or the grader out and start helping and making fire line. The 811 is the communication to where we're helping you do that safely. We know you're fighting a fire. That's a dangerous thing. Like Dylan said, we think that the firefighters need to know what's out there somehow. And the 811 system does that. By exempting them, you're making them blind and you're putting them in danger. Thank you.
And so what would be the timeline? So for instance, if Representative Williams has got a wildfire that started on his ranch and it's remote. So like he said, there's no cell service. How's he going to make that 811 call?
That is a good question. But eventually, like I said, once you get somewhere you can dial 911, you can dial 811.
And so then if for instance, he got word to a neighbor who showed up on the scene and said, all right, I'm on this, please go get where you can get cell service, call 911, call 811. At that point, would they be clear?
Yes. The system works as a system. You call 811. You don't have to bother with anything else because 811, as the lady said earlier, has all the utility operators in your location already mapped out and they automatically get a hold of us 24 hours a day. And it's our responsibility. We have someone on call 24 hours a day. We actually get a message that says we have an emergency locate and we eventually get a call once they go down the tree. But we get a message as soon as that email is sent out that there is a problem at this location, an emergency, and we are to respond to the phone number that's given on that emergency locate.
If it's within your jurisdiction.
Exactly.
Right.
If it affects us, yes.
Okay. All right.
Follow up.
Mhm.
So I've got a dozen fires strung out over 16 miles and we're fighting fire at 2 a.m. and you get an emergency locate. So is it just the liability, the notification, then we are, then we're no longer liable? Or do you expect to participate in a meaningful way at that time?
I'll let him, Dylan, speak to liability. But yes, we do train and we have trained with Laramie County Emergency Management to be a part of the incident command system, to be a liaison with them if our utilities are in an area of emergency, say a fire, to liaison, to tell them where our facilities are at and help them and guide them in being safe. And
Dylan, did you want to follow up through the chair?
Yeah, Madam Chair and Mr. Representative. So directly from the Excavator's Handbook from Wyoming 811, it reads as follows. Upon receipt of an emergency locate request, the notification center call representatives will prepare the request for immediate transmission and will issue a start date equal to the time the emergency excavation is scheduled to begin. You make that phone call. Okay, that fire's been in process for half hour, 45 minutes. You've got people who are on the ground. They've made the phone call to 811. When did the fire start? When did the excavation start? That's the beginning of the excavation per the ticket. That's when the emergency excavations are exempt from the 2 full business day notification time constraints when required, making excavation per Wyoming State Statute 37-12-302E. That's where your defense and your end of your liability begins if you were to strike an underground infrastructure.
Representative Knapp, did you have a question?
Madam Chair, thank you. So just so I understand, we had the question of how do these normally get generated? Is it through 911 dispatch that is calling the 811 number now? And then because I think the sensitivity is things happening real time, how is that technology wise given the layout of the lines to the firefighter?
Dylan?
Madam Chair, Mr. Representative. So as it stands, I'm going to first acknowledge that, yes, this is a portion of the bill that could use some additional care. It's an identified issue since this came up. We agree that this could use some fine tuning. How that would generally work, and it goes back to your example of 16 fires over a number of miles, right? You could use digital white lining on the One Call website to define an area where the fire is or is likely to be in a short period of time. That would be part of your emergency One Call process. From there, it's going to be a matter of coordination between the firefighters, the operators, and One Call of Wyoming in order to keep that ticket open and continue modifying that ticket. And that would be how that expanding area of notification to other operators as they're brought in would occur.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate your testimony. Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So why couldn't dispatch, if dispatch is being called 911?
Notify 811?
Yeah.
Dylan.
Madam Chair, Mr. Representative, this is where I mentioned that we could use some fine tuning of the bill. As the bill is written, the general process is that the excavator is responsible for making the call. So if you have 16 different excavators working out there, they all may fall under a contract for the Forest Service or whomever. Technically, they're each supposed to make their own individual One Call. This is where I think it would make a whole lot of sense to create a new opportunity or a new process within the law and within One Call's internal company policies to allow for, say, the incident commander or 911's call center to make that call directly and have it cover all responding excavators as part of the fire.
Thank you. We appreciate your testimony, all of you.
Thank you all for your time and your questions.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Winter, Representative Winter.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I would direct this question to any one of you four. And this may be common knowledge, I don't know, but I don't understand it. So do you and have you coordinated with all of the different counties, law enforcement agencies? And do you have contact with them throughout the year to talk about this very thing?
Madam Chair, Mr. Representative, absolutely. So as part of CFR 195 and RP 1162 from the American Petroleum Institute, our recommended process is to engage in liaising activities with the emergency responder community, which includes the LEPCs, the local emergency planning committees, of which the fire departments, the police departments, the emergency manager, 911 dispatch, the Department of Transportation, and a host of others are a part of in any county where pipelines operate. So for us, it would be in Platte and Laramie counties. For you, it's.
No, I operate in 10 counties in Wyoming. Madam
So it is absolutely intrinsic to our existing processes to liaise and have good communications and cooperation with those groups.
Follow up?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I guess then my next question is, if all of this is being done, and to my knowledge, almost these fires are reported to the county sheriff in each county. So why do we have a problem? Because my experience has been that if there's a fire, somebody's going to know about it, and the county sheriff's going to know about it. And so why are you folks not contacted? Because that seems to be what we're talking about here. It's not happening. Is that correct?
Well, they're not with 811, they're with the oil company, but in a case like that, where the sheriff had been contacted in a wildfire situation, do they then extend that to any companies that might have resources within that area?
Madam Chair, Mr. Representative, generally speaking, what you described is part of the process. However, again, utilizing the 811 system is the best method of notifying all of the operators in that impacted area. Once you define it using that digital white line that I described, that would be the best way to get the information out in an emergency circumstance.
Okay. All right. Nope, still another question.
Sorry. Thank you, Madam Chairman. So that you've described the practices of your companies, and is that common practice throughout the industry? How you respond to a 811 call? Is that common in your experience throughout the industry, or are you especially vigilant in your practices, I guess? And maybe you can or can't answer that.
Madam Chair, Mr. Representative, for Suncor, I'd like to think we're especially vigilant. I mean, but that is because I like to set our company above and then think that we hit a higher benchmark. To that end, the industry strives to reach that process. I'd definitely reach over to my friends at Tallgrass to answer as well.
Yes, Representative. Pretty much industry-wise, emergency one calls are handled the same. The process for our company is pretty much what Suncor has. We'd be notified by text immediately, boots on the ground immediately. One thing I'd like to bring up to everybody's attention, because I know pipelines are just, my company, we transport both natural gas, crude oil. Not to be repetitive, but we have lines that are just brand new, haven't even got product in them, to lines that were laid in the 50s and 60s. And erosion is a big issue, big time. We have not had any hits from any fires that have happened since I've been in this position, which is 12 years. We fly our pipelines, aerial patrols that are called. So we visually look at our right of ways, make sure nothing's encroached on us. I haven't had any encroachments from a fire line. But to me, this almost seems like a Russian roulette, because it hasn't happened. It's not going to happen. And I was part of the company that had that line hit outside of Cheyenne in 2006. And once that happens, I think it would change your opinion of omitting calling these in.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes,
Just one more
Representative Knapp.
question. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just had a matter of being proactive, because I sat on a fire board for 8 years. And one of the things that you deal with is even in a volunteer system, typically you have range units out there and a fire starts, and there's even conflict between, well, do we wait till full time gets out there, or do we start fighting the fire immediately so it's contained on the spot before it grows faster? So if you know where the lines are being laid, especially new ones and things like that, it seems to me we're working backwards. So in other words, if you know where they are, that should be informed to 811, which obviously it is through the White Line program, which then should filter down to the fire departments, which then should filter out to the range units and ranchers. Would you see a benefit to handling it that way versus the one call?
Dylan?
Madam Chair, Mr. Representative, currently the transmission lines that traverse the entire country, are generally required to be in what's known as the National Pipeline Mapping System. The National Pipeline Mapping System, those maps are available and should be pushed down through the emergency managers and into each local jurisdiction's mapping softwares and systems to allow them access and information to where those transmission lines are. Now, admittedly, we have collection lines, we have distribution lines within cities and some rural communities. Those are not required to be in that system. That is a recognized gap that, to be quite frank, would be difficult to try and bring into that same mapping software due to the volume. Today, there are over 2 million miles of pipeline, natural gas and crude oil, and trying to map all of those, and that's nationwide, not just in Wyoming, trying to map all of those into each individual system would be onerous, which is why it's been just the transmission lines. But that information is available.
Thank you. Further questions? Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate your time. Go ahead, come on down.
Thank you very much.
And then anybody else wants to testify, you're welcome to come down and occupy the next two chairs. We're just trying to speed things up so we have time to work this bill and the next one. Maybe two down on this end. If you guys just, then we've got room for two other people. We're just trying to go ahead, introduce yourself, address the committee.
Madam Chairman, my name is Aaron Clark. I'm the county fire warden for Platte County. And I guess I'm one of those people who just have violated the law for 3 years. Me and 23 other fire wardens in the state. I will tell you, since this law was enacted, our best guess is that we've had 6,000 wildfires in Wyoming. 6,000 wildfires. Since Bill Crapser's, I probably shouldn't say this, but since he's been the state forester, we probably had 40,000 wildfires in the state of Wyoming. That's a lot of fire. I have never, ever called one call. Never thought about it. Not part of my game. I can't find a single fire warden in the state that's ever called one call. I've called BLM, who's our partner. They help us immensely. They've never called one call. Called the Forest Service, who does most of our safety training. Never called one call. Called Camp Guernsey, which is on fire about every other day anymore. They've never called one call. So I don't understand this process that was just described. It's not our process. It's not what we do. We've never done that. I appreciate Representative Williams' question. When we have a fire in Platte County or anywhere else, our hair is on fire. We are trying to stop fires from burning down people's homes. And I have sat there after fires in Platte County and dealt with landowners in tears because their house burnt down, but for I had one more grater blade that I could have put in and saved that house. We are not, in the 6,000 fires that we've put out in this state since one call was enacted, there's not been one bare utility hit. Not one. And to say that this somehow adversely affects my firefighters is offensive. Our firefighters are trained, they're disciplined, they know what they're doing. Our firefighters don't die from hitting utilities. That's just a bunch of hooey and it's a bunch of scare tactics. If we lose a firefighter, it's going to be because a heart attack, a vehicle accident. We ain't getting any younger, our guys. I can tell you that right now. If you look at the last 10 years of statistics from 2007 to 2016, of all the 170 firefighter deaths in wildland fires in the United States, I challenge you to find one that's died from hitting a utility. Now, we did lose one in Wisconsin in 2015 because he drove his truck under a live overhead wire that fell. That's not a buried utility. We work on every fire with Wheatland REA. They're our partner. They come out with us on every fire. They turn off power. As a matter of fact, if I need Wheatland REA guys to help us, their linemen are usually on a fire truck with us. That's the kind of community we have. I understand 17 fires a day. I've had 4 a day when my entire crew was on Camp Guernsey, 100 firefighters, and we can't even possibly get to it. And now somebody wants to say, you need to call 911 or 811 so your firefighters will be safer. That is not a true statement. Okay. Calling 811 is not going to help my firefighters.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clark. Questions for Chief Clark?
One question.
Vice Chairman.
Would it be reasonable? You guys are out fighting fire. I am the wife of a volunteer firefighter for 25 years. I know the gig. Would it be reasonable to ask your dispatch to call 811 and report the fire location?
Chief Clark.
If you could set up a system where when you dial 811, we can tell them it's somewhere between Glendo and El Rancho exit. There's an orange glow on the mountain, which is what we get from the people going down the interstate. Then that's probably something we could do. We can't call in a specific location till we have somebody there.
Okay, thank you. Sir, go ahead. Briefly.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name is Will D. Reich. I'm the fire chief for Palmer Canyon Fire Department in Platte County. We manage everything from Wheatland to the Albany County lines. I hear all these people telling me that I need to call 811 onto a fire, and I wanted to explain a fire that we had this last summer. I was on 24 fires this last summer. I'm an insurance agent. When my alarm goes off, my life comes to a complete stop. I have 2 radios that I carry on my chest and 1 in my truck. When I leave my office, my phone usually doesn't stop ringing until I get to the fire, and my radios are going nuts. I carry 1 radio to talk to dispatch or my fire warden, 1 radio to talk to my other firemen that are close by, and 1 radio to talk to the airplanes in the air. I had a fire that was reported east of Chugwater this last summer. We ended up finding it almost it was in Goshen County, just barely. I had no idea what the address was going to be. I had no idea where it was going to be. I came there to help Tim Ash, my buddy, who's the chief of Chugwater Fire Department. We ended up losing 3,700 acres. We had 7 different departments on it. We had 6 airplanes in the air. My life was living misery for 6 hours, and then it came to an end, and we all went home. On that fire, we had 2 tractors running disc lines all the way around it so that we didn't get into houses down on Bear Creek. Had we not been able to do that, we probably would have lost multiple houses. I don't have time. I don't have the need. I can't call 811. I don't know where I'm at a lot of the times. I wouldn't have a clue where to call.
Okay. Committee questions? Okay, thank you both. Appreciate it. Mr. McGagna.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I won't take much of your time. I just want to make clear that this is an issue not just for our dedicated firefighters, but for all of us as rural landowners in the state of Wyoming. I believe Representative Williams laid out the types of scenarios. I've had a neighbor call me when they have a fire. There are no coordinates. They said it's about a quarter of a mile from that creek and maybe 100 yards from the high hill. And that's the type of description that the fire people get when they get a call. So until they're out there on the fire, they can't provide an accurate description of where it is. And once they're out there on the fire, in many of the areas I'm familiar with, they have no communications back to anyone to convey those messages. So I think in a lot of cases, we as landowners are well aware of utilities that go through our land and are certainly cautious about that. I'm not going to pretend we always know, especially it was a pipeline that was put in 60 years ago. But from a practical perspective, if my ranch is on fire or some of my key pasture land is on fire, what I'm looking for is a quick response, and a response that says, well, we can't do anything yet because we're waiting for clearance from 811 simply doesn't meet our needs. With that, Madam Chair, I would just urge the committee to support this practical change to the legislation that exists.
Okay, commissions or questions for Mr. McGagna? Thank you, appreciate it. Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Committee, my name is Todd Redmond. I'm a representative from Dominion Energy, Wyoming, and I'm also a member of the Board of Directors of One Call of Wyoming. And I have some comments from both perspectives. I am a supervisor of region operations in the Rock Springs area where I oversee a natural gas utility distribution system. And I want to say that we are very grateful to the firefighters that we work with in that area for their efforts and their courage and resilience, and also for these firefighters and their passion that they've demonstrated today. We have worked very tirelessly to develop relationships with the firefighters in our service territories. We operate in 5 counties in Southwest Wyoming, and together we've responded to many fires, mostly in city type situations, but we've been very successful in meeting the needs of our mutual customers. As mentioned earlier in other testimony, we also are very active in our liaison efforts and have been very successful in that realm. And I would encourage other operators who are listening into this conversation to do so, to reach out to their firefighters and share that information and coordinate those efforts to be successful in the future in fighting fire. Industry does not want to impede firefighting efforts. We would like to be a collaborative partner in helping fight wildfire, and it is our goal to do everything we can to help our employees, customers, and firefighters be safe. Industry would ask for a one-call notification when firefighters are doing excavation work in response to critical infrastructure, which could be affected and potentially become a safety concern. We feel that there is still much room to discuss these issues between firefighters, industry, and One Call of Wyoming. And we would like to pursue conversations outside of this committee to find a proactive solution and a protocol that would work for all parties. We would ask that you consider tabling this bill and assigning to committee to review in the interim where we can discuss this and find some alternative solutions. Thank you.
Okay, questions for Mr. Redmond, Vice Chairman Newsom?
So there appear to be the statutes referenced by Ms. Warren of 37-12-301B that defines what an emergency means. And then a couple other places in just a cursory look through the statutes, there seems to make exception for emergency situations in a couple other places, including the requirement to call seems to be exempted.
The requirement to call, from what I understand, is not exempted. That call still needs to take place, but they can start working on that activity right away after they make that call. And so I don't see that there's going to be a lot of hindrance in that effort for them to do that. I think it'll also allow some things to go on behind the scenes where operators, utility operators can work with other communications chiefs, for example, with the firefighters and help come up with solutions and identify areas where firefighters need to be concerned with critical infrastructure.
Okay, further questions for Mr. Redmond? Thank you. Appreciate it, gentlemen. Anyone else like to testify? Mr. Riemann. Oh, and Mr. Obermueller.
Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee, Jeremiah Riemann here on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. Commissioners do support this legislation, but what I will say is that I don't believe that we're opposed to finding a solution that involves some sort of communication at some point in the game. I think the most critical piece of doing something this legislative session is around the liability component of this. You've heard expressed that without that communication, there is that liability component. And it can be difficult to make that call within moments of the fire. It can often be long after the fire is out. So I do think that we need to do something perhaps this legislative session, but we're committed to working on the communication portion. And I have worked in this space in the past relative to county road maintenance. We were able to come to agreement with the stakeholders that are in the room around appropriate notification that didn't require actually a call, but put some burdens in some instances on the operators of these utilities to provide notification back to the county. So there are ways to do it, and we're willing to commit to that, but I do think something has to happen.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Riemann? Representative Sweeney.
So if we, thank you, Madam Chairman, if we advance the bill as is, how do we then come back to the table during the interim and try to parcel out? I agree with you, the liability issue does seem to be pretty pertinent, but is there a way that we can, without laying this back or tabling it and studying it in the interim, which I don't think this committee is probably the right spot for that. It's probably corporations is my guess. But
has there been any discussion, Mr. Freeman, with any other committees for an interim study? I guess is what Representative Sweeney's asking.
Well, Mr. Chairman, or Madam Chairwoman, I'm not aware of a committee interim topic at this point in time. And I don't know the precise way to do this other than I have, suggested perhaps you put a sunset of 1 year on this, which then puts it on the stakeholders to find that precise solution. And there is a working group that meets on a regular basis. I don't attend all of those meetings, but they do converse these issues and bring stakeholders from the outside in. And this would likely be one of those topics that should be discussed amongst them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Obermueller.
Madam Chairman, Pete Obermueller, the Patrolman Association of Wyoming. Thank you for the time. Again, I'm having some deja vu for a number of reasons. But some of you may not know that prior to taking this job with the Petroleum Association, I sat in Mr. Reeman's seat. I was the director of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. I left a lot of unexploded ordinance for Mr. Reeman to clean up, and he's done phenomenal. And the county road maintenance issue that he brought up is one of those. So when I was executive director of County Commissioners Association, it came to my attention all the exact same arguments that Representative Haraldson is making with respect to plowing snow on county roads and doing de minimis road grading on rural roads all across the state. And by a strict reading of the law at that time, every single county, all of their road and bridge departments were breaking the law every time they went out to plow a bus route that they're required to do by statute. When they went out to just do basic grading after a flood, all that kind of stuff, that required a call to one call. Never happened. No one called. Everyone violated the law. So as you all know, I can sometimes do, I got all ginned up about that, came stomping in here and said, we got to exempt this. There's no reason to not exempt this. Everything is more complicated. So what happened was we set that back. I left it to Jeremiah to solve. He sat in a room with everybody here. We solved it. It's fine. That's what we can do here too, Madam Chairman. Here's what PAW would like. We would like our wildland firefighters to be able to fight any fire in any way they want, without delay, without bureaucratic morass, without any of that. We don't want them to wait for little flags to get put out or little lines to get put, nothing. We want them to fight fires and do the job that they're so good at doing. All we want to ensure is that there's some mechanism so that my members can reach out to them and say, here's our infrastructure. Please be careful in the amazing work that you do. We can do that. We just need a little time to do that. Madam Chairman, I think all the questions and conversation from all the representatives to both One Call and to Suncor and others, that's exactly the conversation that needs to happen under a little bit more time scenario. So, Madam Chairman, I would just ask that you lay it back and we can talk further about. I commit to you to being involved in that, and we can find a solution that's workable for everyone.
Okay, questions for Mr. Obermuller? All right, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate your testimony. We'll take one more and then we're going to work the bill. If we work the bill, I don't know what we're going to do.
Hi, I'm Jason Hendricks with Range. We're a broadband provider. We have fiber lines all throughout the state. I'm not going to repeat what everyone said. We're just a little bit different that we're a communications company. So we don't blow up when people dig our stuff, but communications get stopped. And so if you need to tell people they need to evacuate, we also connect to cell towers. So communication is to people. If that gets cut during a fire, that can be very dangerous. I echo the concerns you just laid out as far as give us time to talk about this. I was part of the conversations on the county road grading issue. Prior to that, actually the provisions of the bill that set up the penalties and the liabilities that's a concern, all that was discussed in a group and brought as a bill that everyone could support. Those are the best one-call bills, and we have a history of having that work very well. When bills come up during the legislative session, they tend not to be as good. So I would ask that it be laid back. I don't think it needs to be an interim study necessarily, because I do think that group is the best group to do it. It took a lot of back and forth on just simply how you do that grading, multiple meetings, and we finally came up with something. I think this is something that we can do. I certainly understand the concerns. If there is a desire to have a bill move forward this year, I would at least put in a provision that would require a call as soon as practicable. So maybe it's not right away, but as soon as somebody can get a hold of dispatch and let utilities know that there's a fire going on, you can do the V&H coordinates. I think that's reasonable. And then having a sunset to kind of give an incentive to folks to come together to prior to next year. I think those two provisions within the bill, if you want to move it forward. Otherwise, again, I'd prefer that it actually just be laid back and let us all talk about it.
Okay, questions for Mr. Hendricks? Thank you. Appreciate your testimony. Mr. Anderson or Senator Anderson, are you going to testify to this bill? Sure. I'm sorry. I thought you were here for your next bill. I should have called you sooner. Okay.
Madam Chairman, I just wanted to address one thing that's been discussed here a little bit. It was discussed that there was a accident here in Cheyenne where a dozer hit a pipeline.
Mhm.
In my 40 years with the equipment business, there has been two, and one was over at Rock Springs that also hit a pipeline, but they were not making fire line. They were pre-ripping for a pipeline, and they had done a one call and had it tested.
Mhm.
Ripping goes from 3 to 4 foot in the ground. And so they're down there. When you're clearing a fire line, all you're clearing is combustibles, which is just on the surface. So there's not as much danger of bothering any pipelines, maybe a communication line, but not pipelines. But anyway, just wanted to make sure that everybody knew those two were not related to fire line building. Thank you.
Okay. Questions for Chairman Anderson? Thank you, sir. Well, with that, I think we'll close public testimony. Committee, what is your pleasure on this bill?
Madam Chairman, I'd like to refer this to corporations.
I would like to move the bill, Madam Chairman.
Moved by Haroldson, seconded by Williams. Okay. Well, let's go through it, committee. Page 1, do we have any amendments? Page 1, as you will see, is our new language. I do have an amendment. I propose a sunset of, I'd like to get them through this fire season. It's not uncommon to have winter fires. So I'm going to kick out a couple of ideas here. December 31st or a 1-year sunset. Committee, what are your thoughts?
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
1 year.
1 year? Okay, well, I will move a 1-year sunset, and Williams, you second it? You do? And do you have any more comments? Okay. Question on the amendment. All those in favor, show of raising your hands. Opposed, same sign. We have one in opposition. So Carol, do you savvy my amendment? Okay, and I can get with you afterwards as well.
Madam Chairman.
Representative Sweeney.
As was mentioned in testimony, is there any place in here on the as practical?
There's not, but you could add that language.
I'm not sure where that would even apply or go.
Well, we could think about that, and we could add it as a committee of the whole amendment if it comes out of committee, the bill does.
Okay.
Okay, so any further motions or amendments? Any further comments?
Madam
Okay.
Chair.
Yes.
I was just going to point out this has the traditional effective date of July 1, 2022, which is sort of,
sorry.
I know that the fire season could start potentially earlier. Am I on the wrong one? Sorry, never mind.
That's okay. All right, I think we've had enough discussion. Please call roll, Carol.
Representative Banks. Representative Harrelson. Representative Jennings. Representative Knapp. Vice Chair Newsom.
Aye.
Representative Sweeney.
No.
Representative Williams. Representative Winter. Madam Chair Flitner.
Aye.
Madam Chair, 8 ayes and 1 no, that being Representative Sweeney.
Do pass as amended. Okay. So there's work to be done by all parties.
Madam Chairman.
We'll hope they get together during the interim. Yes, sir.
Just real quick, an idea before anyone else exits.
We've got another bill to.
And a thought real quick. as I was listening to this, when the fire starts, time is so of the essence and no one really has a clue what's going on. So an idea is, and just as we're talking about a work through, it sounds to me like maps and education beforehand is going to do so much more than a hasty call afterwards with no knowledge of really even where it's at. So the education and maps are probably, in my opinion, an idea as we move forward with this.
I'm sure you'll be involved in the conversation. Okay, Chairman Anderson, come on down. Our next bill or before us is Senate File 11, display of state flag. You thought they were here for you. It's not very nice. All right, walk us through the bill.
Madam Chairman, committee, thank you for having me and thank you for hearing my bill. The bill's pretty easy, so I'm going to walk you through some history. So just relax. There's no fire here. There's no fire danger or anything that you have to deal with. But I'll take you back to 1916 when we were a young state, about 26 years old, and we had no flag. We had no flag. 26 years we didn't have a flag. So the Daughters of the American Revolution put out a contest and said, design a flag for Wyoming. So a young lady that lived in Buffalo, Wyoming with her family on the Cross H cattle outfit just south of Buffalo, which Chairman Flitner drove by many times. She was just out of the Chicago Institute of Art and decided she'd design a flag for you. So she designed a flag, turned it in, and the chairman of the Daughters of the American Revolution, Dr. Grace Hebard, called her in about a week and said that they were going to use her design. So in 1917, the 14th Wyoming legislature adopted her design of the flag. And so that's what was the design from then on. Now, one of the little problems with that is her flag. She designed the buffalo looking out on the prairie. Since it's a prairie animal and it was free to roam and everything, her design had it looking away from the staff. Dr. Hebard was the one in charge of building the flags and having them manufactured, and she liked the buffalo facing the staff. So the buffalo faces the staff, as you'll notice today, and has for 105 years. Well, in 1945, the legislature figured out that they had never paid the $20, or nobody had paid the $20 that Verna Keys had earned from designing the flag. So they offered her some flags, which were her original design. But they said, you can't display them outside the house because the buffaloes pointed the wrong direction. So she accepted the flags and took them. Well, her heirs have displayed those flags outside the home. One is in the museum in Buffalo, and one is in the library in Casper. Mrs. Keys moved from Buffalo to Casper, and she lived in my district in Casper. So everything is okay till one of the heirs figured out that she broke the law by putting that flag outside the house. And she wanted that changed. And then she started on it, and quite a few more in my district started on it. So I said, let's get it changed. Let's get that changed. So you'll see the law on page 2, line 20, 1920. We added, unless Mrs. Keys or her heirs undertakes to donate the flag for public display at a Wyoming State, County, or municipal building. So that's all it does, is just give them the okay to display those flags outside their home. And I think there's one in the state museum also, but how you'll know it's one of the originals is the buffalo looks away from the staff. So that's all this is doing. I would ask that you do a little cleanup here on page 2, line 11. It says Miss Verna Keys. That's a little confusing because her maiden name was Keys and her married name was Keys, but they're spelled differently. And when she was in Buffalo, her name was Verna Keays, not Mrs. Keys, Keyes. So if we could make that one little change, that would help the errors also. They called me and said I'd spelled her name wrong, which I think that's been spelled wrong for 105 years.
So Chairman Anderson, then on the line above there on line 10, where it refers to the winning design so adopted was that submitted by Mrs. A.C. Keys, that would need to be changed there because if her maiden name, married name was Keays. Was her maiden name?
Her married name was Keyes. Now of Casper, it says.
Okay,
Now of Casper, which that was Mrs. Keys that was in Casper,
okay.
not the,
So her maiden
Maiden
name was Keays.
but on the next line,
Okay,
it's then Miss Verna Keys of Buffalo, Wyoming.
okay.
It's really confusing. And I know in my past, I thought there was two people, but
Sure.
it was only one person. Verna Keys is who designed the flag for you. And it's kind of interesting. Some of our past governors were in on the deal. Let's see here. Lester Hunt was in on presenting one of those. And Lester Hunt, as you all know, was our Secretary of State, went to Washington, was our governor, and he was the one that designed the Bucky horse on our license plates. And a lot of people claim that they did that, but Lester Hunt actually did it.
So
that's
Chairman
all there is to
Anderson, I
the
have
bill.
another question for you.
Okay.
On line 10 then, where it does say, and then Miss, would it be more reasonable to say at the time, Miss Verna, which would refer to her maiden status at the time she, and we can ask LSO in terms of wordsmithing, what that might be best.
That might be best. This
be-
was done long before LSO,
Sure,
long before LSO.
right. Questions
uh,
for Chairman Anderson? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Do we have any public testimony on this bill? Nobody online? Nina? No? Okay. All right, then let's, committee, what's your pleasure? Moved by Sweeney, seconded by Banks. All right, any amendments on page 1? Page 2? Yes, so we will propose an amendment on line. I'm thinking it should be, what did I say a minute ago? At the time. So on line 10, rather than and then, insert at the time, Miss, and then it would move to Miss Verna, and then it would change the spelling to her maiden name, which would be Keays. Okay. Yeah, we would delete and then insert at the time, Miss Verna, and then delete the spelling of Keyes and insert her maiden name spelling Keays. Seconded by Haroldson. Questions on the amendment?
Is it Keayes?
Keays? Yes. Keays. God, that would be bad if we got it wrong.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to propose a different spelling for that name.
Jennings. All right, questions on the amendment? All in favor, show of hands. Opposed, same sign. Passes unanimously. Any further amendments, discussions? A question on the bill, please call the roll.
Representative Banks. Representative Harrelson. Representative Jennings. Representative Knapp.
Aye.
Vice Chair Newsom.
Aye.
Representative Sweeney.
Aye.
Representative Williams. Representative Winter.
Aye.
Madam Chair Flitner.
Aye.
Madam Chair, that's 9 ayes. Do pass with amendments.
Yes, ma'am. Okay.